Well, that is a personal challenge that I've struggled with for a very, very long time. You know, what is the one true religion?
Welcome back to the channel, everybody. We're here today to talk Heretic. Hayden, welcome.
Thank you. I feel like we haven't done one of these in a while.
It's
definitely
been a minute.
One of our longer breaks for sure.
It's been a minute, and by a minute,
gonna
it's
be
been
back.
10 days.
Really?
Yeah, we did longer. One on Halloween itself, talking about
That's
Halloween.
right. That's right. Okay.
So, but for a new movie, it's been a minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, feels good to be back in the chair.
Yeah.
It was nice to, get some AMC rewards points. So redeem my free birthday month popcorn. So
there you go. coming up. So yeah, we're excited for that, and for a November that's relatively packed with movies that are going to be anywhere between good and not good. So looking at you, Wicked, we'll see what you bring to the table.
Oh, geez.
I know. But for today, we're going to talk Heretic, the third movie I saw in theaters this weekend.
Good for you, man.
I needed to just do something else other than anything else. Other than, just no TV, none of it. And yeah, so I saw Conclave on Wednesday, which is outstanding, by the way.
A very different side of the religious spectrum on film too. From Heretic.
Yeah, no kidding. So Ralph Fiennes is there's no way that man does not get nominated for Best Actor. I don't know if he'll win
forward season for sure.
Yeah, but he was outstanding in the movie. And then I saw Blitz on Thursday, the World War II movie, and then I saw Heretic on Friday. So yeah, we wrapped up with the horror movie, which I figured was a really appropriate way to end the week. So you saw it as well. You just saw it. Like, you are
I'm fresh out the theater. Yeah, it's been less than an hour. I basically drove home from the theater and got here. So haven't had as much time to process it as you have. And I don't know. This is one of those movies that I think my opinion may change over time on, as I have time to sit with it, because it's a lot to process. There's a lot going on.
That's kind of the point of it, right? Like, I feel.
Yeah. So what are your top level thoughts? Now, you've had more time to sit with it than me. So what are you thinking?
I think it's a movie designed to make you think, which is strange for a horror movie, but not altogether too strange for an A24 horror movie.
Not at all, right? I think that's their MO at this point.
Yeah. I got some of the, now not from plot or anything, but some of the same vibes, and like all that stuff is like Hereditary from this in good ways. And Hereditary is outstanding. And spoiler alert, I thought this movie was pretty good too. But top level thoughts, I think Hugh Grant is back. Hugh Grant is fantastic in this movie. And honestly, if he's not in this, I don't know if I even like this movie.
Yeah, I think he carries.
So
he not necessarily carries, but I think he definitely is the highlight, right?
No one else can explain Monopoly and make it compelling and kind of creepy.
Sinister.
Yeah, like him. Because his role requires like a really devious side and diabolical side, but also like a charm that Hugh Grant just has and always has. So it works, and it's outstanding casting.
Yeah, he's like if your favorite professor became a psycho.
Really, yeah. And so the premise of the movie is, he's essentially running an experiment. Testing his hypothesis on faith and on what the one true God is.
Yeah.
So high level thoughts. I think it was good. I think it does jump around a little bit. It does start a thought and then kind of backtrack and go somewhere else, and then maybe come back to it, maybe not. It does, as we call it, the weave.
It does the weave.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
there's concepts of a plot. No, I thought
just like the weave, yeah. Right. Anyway, you're what? How about you?
I had fun with it, but I think it felt very paint by numbers A24 horror movie to me.
Yeah, and it's sad that we can say that now,
right? And it's weird, and it's just there's this is a whole topic for another video, but I think people kind of treat an A24 movie almost as people treat movies by directors, and I think that's a weird thing to do, and gets people to have a lot of expectations sometimes that maybe aren't necessarily fair or helpful. But then again, they very clearly deliberately market a lot of their movies like that, where they're like, hey, this is from the same minds that brought you Hereditary. And, in some cases it's just the minds that, are attached to the hand that signed the check.
And it's from really successful brand building, right? Like A24's built a brand recognition, and every trailer for an A24 movie starts with giant font A24 on the screen, right?
Right. You lock in, you listen. So I was excited for this movie. I think the premise is really interesting. I like the angle of religious horror and the thought of just people being zealots, right? And people holding on to their faith and using it to manipulate and to cause problems. And then on the opposite side, people who are really downtrodden, people who are victims, right, of persecution, holding on to that to keep them going. And I think it explored that really well. I agree. Hugh Grant was probably the best part of this movie, and his performance really was incredible. I think they did a really good job building tension. Like, I do think this movie was actually scarier than I thought it would be. And a lot of times you watch as much horror as we do, and that's hard for a horror movie to feel that. But I did. And I think that's down to a lot of things: atmosphere, lighting, mood, soundtrack, performances, the fact that I did really grow to like these two girls, the sisters in the biblical sense, right? The sisters of the church.
Our missionaries, yeah.
Yeah, and I was rooting for them in the face when they were going through. And I think that the sense of mystery about it is really fun, but I think at times it gets a little convoluted. And this is one of those movies where I think the journey is way more exciting than the destination.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. And with almost all what you said, I think one of the things that's saying, did you find the topic, some of the way they went about it, controversial at all?
No, but I'm also a person who has been around secular thought and secular discussion for 15 years at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair. And that's one of the things I want to bring up. And that's why I asked you that question, because in 2024, I don't feel like those ideas are as controversial. And that's partly because statements like this have been made over the years. And I remember two specific instances where this was talked about in films where it was highly controversial. And it was when the Da Vinci Code film released. So there's that brief thing where Ian McKellen's character is giving like the slideshow, talking about, the history of Jesus and Christianity in itself and everything, and parallels with others and all that. And then when Bill Maher released Religulous in 2008 or 9 or whatever it was, and really dug in, and granted in the Bill Maher antagonistic way, trying to rile up people who are religious, talking about the exact same thing. So there's a sequence in this movie where Hugh Grant's character, Mr. Reed, is talking about how, the Immaculate Conception is a story that's been repeated many, many, many times throughout history and for thousands of years prior,
including in the Phantom Menace.
Including in the Phantom Menace. And that's what made me roll my eyes when I saw that, like, in theaters, even as younger, as a kid. So, I thought that's one thing that stood out to me, was that these things are not as controversial now, but there was a time that I could remember that they were. And
for sure. But I honestly think that's where I think picking the fact that the girls are Mormon missionaries is such a fascinating choice, because Mormonism is a religion that is relatively new in the scheme of history.
It's the Bob Ross edition.
The Bob, right. The Monopoly comparison is it's the Bob Ross edition of To the Base Monopoly to the Bible, right? It's the regional offshoot, I think is what he says, the odd regional offshoot. And you get to this point where it's like, I think it's an interesting pick, because it has obviously a lot of roots in Christianity, which is, I would say, in the Western world, probably the most popular, most practiced religion. But it's this very devout, very odd, very misunderstood, very mysterious almost, right? I think there's a lot of people who don't really fully understand the Mormon faith and what it's about. And so I think it was really interesting to pick them as our representatives, right? Of any religion they could be. And it was, I don't know, it was an interesting, very interesting back and forth between the sisters and the and Hugh Grant's character, because it almost played out like a Jubilee debate. There was a lot of this movie is just them talking and bringing up points and refuting those points and owning each other with facts and logic, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's what impressed me about it, is that some of the creepiest moments of this are from when these women have this realization that he already knows the answers to the things they've come to tell him. And that his motives for having them there are obviously very different. And
they're different than from what I expected, even. Like, I think what his motive is, what his answer is, what he's seeking, what he believes in, I think are all much more interesting and unique than I'd expected going in. But not, I don't think it hits the potential of where it could have gone. And we'll go into that more in the spoiler territory, because there's a moment where I was very, very in, and then I kind of tapered off a little bit.
Okay, that's fair. So I think we'll head into spoiler territory here shortly, but just to kind of set us up, we reach a point in this like makeshift church where
it's got this creepy little fake church facade of a church, I guess you'd say, in his house.
And there's two doors. Choose the door. There's a door for believers and there's the door for non-belief, and they have to pick which one to go through. And from that point onward, we'll do this in story fashion, but we'll give you a score first if you're watching this cold and just want to know whether to go see the movie. This is one of those, Hayden, where you and I are split.
Yeah,
I think you would recommend more to keep this for home, right? Like wait till it comes out on streaming.
I mean, I think it's worth your time. I think it's interesting. I think it poses some interesting questions, but I don't necessarily think it's one you got to rush out and see. I don't think the theatrical experience, it's not really a movie that has scope or scale or anything that you're going to benefit from seeing it in the theater. So I think it's one to definitely put in your backlog. I think it is worth watching this year, but I don't think it's one that you necessarily need to make your top priority to go see this immediately, unless you are a really big fan of A24 horror, because I think this hits all the notes and is a good part of that collection.
I agree. So I agree with pretty much all of what you said there. Is it absolutely necessary to go see this in theaters? No. If you like to go see movies in theaters like me, sure, go see it. There's a lot worse shit in theaters right now. But
and it's only going to get worse.
It's only going to get worse. As I said, Hugh Grant is absolutely fantastic in this movie. And it's almost worth it just for that. Because Hayden had like a crash and burn period career-wise where it went bad. And then he's kind of built it back up with Paddington, and there was one other one. Yeah. And now to this, and I feel like he's back. We gave this a 7.5, which, is half good, half cop out.
It's like it's almost great. It's approaching greatness, but it's not quite there, right? It's a good that's closer to great than it is to okay, I would say.
That works for me. Okay. So if you haven't seen it yet and are planning on it, don't want spoilers, now's the time to bid us adieu. Watch our other stuff, though. Subscribe to the channel and like the video and all of that. And check out the review on our site, strangely.awesomegames.com. It's already up, as well as a review of Blitz, Saturday Night, and a bunch of other movies that have come out recently. So, all right. Spoiler time. Hayden, well, I guess before I ask you that question, just really quick anecdotal here. My theater called me like yesterday. It was like, hey, the studio actually decided to move this movie from the huge screen to a much smaller theater, like screen inside the theater. And they kept it at the same time, but they're like, hey, for the confusion, which there was none because they were calling to tell me, We're going to give you a pass for a free movie in the future. I'm like, awesome.
That's wonderful.
I already like this.
Hell yeah.
Let's go. It also told me that there were probably not many people booked to see this movie when I was going.
Yeah.
I was correct. Less than 5.
Whoa. Okay.
So that was a little unfortunate. Same thing was true for Blitz, which I understand more because Blitz has a confirmed Apple TV Plus date of November 22nd. It's not far away. So this one though does not have that. And I don't feel like this is a get it out before Christmas on digital type of movie, you know.
You don't necessarily need to. I think it's just niche is all. I think it's definitely feels like it's for a very specific audience, and I think it's going to be hard for it to find one outside of them.
I think this is going to count on some word of mouth in the theatrical sense, and it's really going to pick up steam when it hits streaming.
For sure.
I feel like that's absolutely going to happen. We know A24 always goes to Max. And when it gets to Max, it'll be plugged in a really good way. You know, for example, when Horizon made it to Max, it was the #1 streamed movie for like a week straight.
Yeah.
Period. Like not just on Max, but anywhere.
Like, yep.
So, which is saying something because no one went to theaters except for me. So, anyway, what was the moment in the movie that kind of turned you off?
So it's funny because it's the inverse of what usually happens with me. A lot of times when a horror movie has twists and turns or has a big secret, a big mystery, and the answer is just like, oh, it's a paranormal thing, I'm like, cop out, kind of whatever.
Sure.
They do that here, but they don't commit to it. They do a paranormal thing where he's like, I've found the one true religion, and it's the book I'm going to write because I have a woman who is capable of resurrection, and I've been killing her and watching her resurrect over and over again. And I need y'all poison blueberry pie this time. And I need y'all to like basically tell me what she sees, what she reports she sees when she's gone for that brief time. And I'm like, this is such a cool premise. This is such a cool moment. It's interesting. It's done in such a disturbing way where the design of the character is really freaky looking, and they don't let you see it in that much light. They really take their time. Most of the time she's just kind of cloaked. So it was really exciting for me I was like, I'm in, I'm all in. And then later, our final girl, I think Sister Barnes is the one, right?
I think she is the one that ends up surviving.
Okay.
Like I will get that information for you.
Thank you. Right? Anyway,
Sister Barnes.
Okay, so Sister Barnes is like Nancy Drew's ass basically, and is like, no, actually, I thought that was what happened at first, but now I actually think that when we weren't looking, you switched her with a different body, and then you brought in an identical person that is still alive to show us, make us think that was her, and that's what happened. And I was like, but there were no clues to that for us as an audience.
There was a tiny one though, with the head was turned as when on the table when they came back.
Yeah, she's like, I swear the body looks different. And
I stand corrected, by the way, it was Sister Paxton, not Sister.
Oh, sorry.
Barnes.
So Sister Paxton is.
Well, I was wrong too. We were all wrong. So
apologies.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Sister Paxton says that, and I'm just like, I was like, oh.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a bit of a bummer.
They give you a chance to notice it, but I'm with you. I really liked where this was headed. Also, Sister Paxton was the one that I don't want to say like the character annoyed me, but kind of, because she was the one that had like the very blind faith, you know?
She had that, and she also had typical horror movie
dummy stuff. Yeah,
I don't know what to call it, but just, you know, like she's kept putting herself in precarious positions, and like, it's kind of similar to the characters in Speak No Evil, where it's like she's so scared of, she doesn't want to make anyone uncomfortable or stir the pot or be awkward, and her motivation for doing that is like, I don't want to lose a potential convert.
She is the
missionary
really version of the Halloween commercial every year where they're like, let's hide behind the chainsaws and all that, you know. Yeah. And she even says, That's
It's
where
an
this movie
interesting
lost.
dynamic, though. It's an interesting dynamic, I think, for her to do that, because in most of her movies, that's stupid. But for her, I think it makes sense in her character that she would put herself in harm's way to try and convert people.
That's true. Yep.
And not just because she believes in the faith so hard, but because she's also insecure because she's like underperforming as a missionary. And she's not getting enough baptisms. She's not meeting her baptism
not
quota.
converting enough, not bringing enough cash. I mean, converts into the church.
Right.
So where this lost me a little bit was with that same character, but she actively at times she's so blinded by faith early in the film that she doesn't like logic just like makes her almost like self-destruct.
Short circuit.
You know, yeah. And she even says at one point, I'm not smart enough to know why, but I believe or I have faith, right?
Yeah, she's like, I know you. She's like, I know this is. I know you did this, or I know you want me to say this, but I'm not smart enough to understand why.
Yeah,
or to know.
But then all of a sudden, she's like puzzled out the whole thing. She's figured out his entire like, you know, plot and has it all figured out. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah, by the end of it, dude, it's like she's like, you know what? You're like the last hour of like a Silent Hill or Resident Evil, and you're like, I know how your puzzles work now. Like I'm breezing through this.
It's a little abrupt and it's a little much, and you know, for someone who couldn't figure out how to like strike a match 10 minutes earlier, it's just a bit of a leap, but it was necessary for the story, and I did like both of the characters, both of the sisters. So yeah, I am pulling for them. I'm not sure how much, because there's part of it like I, like you, was brought up, you know, same way, a lot of those conversations, and except it happened after being like forced to be confirmed. So I wasn't able to really ask those questions, which I'd always been thinking until afterwards. So there's a lot of like, in my mind, conflict seeing these people with this blind faith and like, oh, you should want to believe the same things we believe. And there's part of me that's like, ew to that, but you know, and to each their own, right? Like if you believe it, awesome, go nuts. But that type of thing. So yeah, I mean, but they are likable. And then we learn she goes literally down the hole, because she figured out that the dripping water has to like drain somewhere. And that there's a body like under the table, underneath the room. Goes down there, and all of a sudden here's a bunch of women or people, I think all women, in cages. And one of those like impactful moments of the movie, I think, where you see like the good versus evil, is where she stops and gives her coat to the woman in the cage. Gotcha. It's like a really small moment. But even in that moment of sheer terror, she has that kindness,
compassion, right?
Yeah. Whereas he just doesn't care. They're test subjects to him.
And I think the implication of that, right, is that he's done this like several times. And basically that he traps these women and kidnaps them, then they end up being his prophets for the later experiments. And you get a sense that he's almost frustrated that he's been correct every time. Like he's like, y'all make this so fucking easy. Like I'm bored. Like I know. You're so predictable. Like do something different. Like
yeah, I agree 100%. It is such a nuanced performance from Hugh Grant, and that's the biggest reason for me to watch this movie again at some point.
He's a fun villain. He's a great villain. And he's like a charismatic, understandable, sympathetic villain. And he's also self-aware. And there's moments where he gets to be genuinely goofy. Like when he goes on his long-winded thing where he explains his analogy. And I don't know, like I think my favorite part of the movie is when he's talking about how everything is an iteration, right? And he uses the example of the song from the 60s that that band sued Radiohead for copying that song for Creep, and then Lana Del Rey copied Creep, and then Radiohead sued them suit her, and one, even though their song was already proven to be
stolen. Yeah.
iterative of something else. And it's a really, really funny example, and it applies in this scenario, and it's a really interesting way to think about it. And I had never really thought of the fact that so much of creation myth has similar origins or similar details or similar facts or just, aspects of the premise.
And he flat out calls out, the Mormon faith and says, I think Joseph Smith wanted to avoid getting into trouble for having a bunch of different like mistresses, right?
So the polygamy thing, which is like such a blasphemous claim for these girls to hear.
They don't know how to respond to that.
Yeah, and I think like that's before this movie gets scary, it's really tense and honestly really awkward. Like, honestly, for probably almost 20, 30 minutes of just them just talking in the front room, and he's asking all these prying questions, and they're very, uncomfortable.
And I think he only really starts to make it uncomfortable after he sort of demonstrates that he knows as much or more about their religion as they do. And so he has the high ground, as Obi-Wan would say. And it just makes it harder for them because now they feel really at a disadvantage, and even more so than they would have. So,
and I think for him, it's like a moment of like, as a theological student, right? As an intellectual, he's like, how dare you try and convert me when you don't even know, you have nothing new to tell me about your faith. You have no new information. Like you ostensibly, you don't know, you don't understand this information. You're only regurgitating points that you've been told. And I think it's a really interesting deconstruction of those characters. And I wish that the sister who didn't survive, Sister Barnes, got more time. She was the more interesting character to me. She was. And there's a big thing they do where it's like, he at one point cuts her arm open, fishes in there, and she has the birth control implant, right?
Yep.
And he's like, why would she have this? Like, we all don't believe in this. Like, no one would be okay with that. And it's funny because I noticed the scar earlier in the movie, and he seems to as well. And I thought for sure he was going to say something, he was going to pry, but he didn't. And I think there's so many layers to that character where they talk about like, it's like, well, like the sister who really believed introducing them was like, I'm from this in Utah, she's from this city in Utah, and Sister Barnes is like, well, actually, I'm originally from Philadelphia. And there's a lot of moments where she kind of sidesteps, and I think that she seems like a person who is falling out of love with the faith, potentially on her way out of being in the church. And I think it would have been really fascinating to explore that more.
One of the interesting things, Hayden, is when they go to the doors, right? And Sister Paxton goes to the non-believer door and Barnes goes to the believer, where in reality, I feel like if they're going with their heart, it would have been flipped.
I agree.
And they were both doing what they thought they had to do to win the game at that point. And that is something I found interesting. Now with the Scar 2 and the like birth control.
Well, just real quick before you move on, but what's really fascinating about the door thing too is they both lead to the same place.
Yeah. Do you feel like the experience at the bottom of the stairs would have been any different if they'd gone through the other door?
No, because both doors open to the same pit, the same room. You see that later. They both funnel into the same place. So I think it was really it was a thought experiment is all it was. He just wanted to see and was interested in the psychology of which they would choose and why.
Yep. Agree. So the Scar though, and the device, what was funny is that Reed banked on Paxton's like just sort of naivety and banked on her not knowing what that was and tried to sell her on the idea that it would prove that his resurrection of Barnes didn't work because she
was microchipped.
she's actually an imposter. She's not a real person.
Yeah.
She's one of the like it's almost like he's trying to sell her that we're in a simulation at this point.
Not almost, he is.
Yeah.
He straight up is. He even talks to Solutions Theory, and he's like, he calls her an NPC.
Yes.
He's like, she has that chip. She's an NPC. She's just a synthetic. And I'm like, this dude is going off his rocker. And I was like, what are we doing here? And then she's like, you don't even believe that. Like, you're filibustering because this experiment is not going the way you plan. And he's like, yeah, shit, you're right. LOL. And I think that's the thing that was so funny to me and just about the character is like every time she thwarted part of the plan, or at least understood it, he was like thrilled. You know,
Yeah.
he was like a professor in a Socratic seminar. He's like, well done, pat on the back, give me a high five, good job. Like almost congratulatory.
Should we talk about what the one true religion is?
Yeah.
So we learned the one true religion is control. How do you feel about that?
They made it seem like it was going to be Satanism, to be honest, or some ancient pagan scariness. And so kudos to them for not doing that. But I do think that it's one of those I think it's supposed to be like a big like mic drop moment. And I'm like, this is not new. This is not an interesting conclusion to come to. Like George Carlin was telling people that religion is control in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, and even before that, like the whole Protestant movement was founded on the premise that all of these other religions are controlled. We won't be, I promise, right? So this is a century-old idea that they presented as if it was something that like they were really smart for saying, which kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, I see that. I liked it and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it because as much as everything you just said is true, it still hasn't sunk in.
For a lot of people.
With many, many people.
Potentially most.
Yeah.
Right? If certain tallies are the indicator.
But I think it goes beyond religion, though. I think the fact that control is the religion, like people crave control, whether it's control over others or honestly control over themselves, being controlled by something else. People like rules. They like structure. They like having a person in charge that tells them it's going to be okay and tells them what to do to make it okay, and et cetera, et cetera.
Which, like,
so
I guess opposite of hindsight is 2020. Foresight is 2020. The fact that a movie with that message and that ending came out, 3 days after an election?
And that's what I didn't like about it.
Crazy timing.
Yeah. That's what I didn't like about it, is that it's the type of thing that's open-ended enough that no matter which side of the quote-unquote aisle you are on, you're going to convince yourself that's like, yeah, it's proven me right.
You can apply it either way. Yeah, it's almost this weird, like, it's double-sided confirmation bias supporting ideas, which unfortunately the only thing those do is just create more division.
Yeah.
Because you walk out of the theater, both sides potentially thinking they're right and this vindicated me.
Yep. Because it's either where you're going to keep X groups down, or it's people saying like, yeah, back to those COVID vaccines, or whatever it is, right? Like it's, right. I'm not wrong though.
No, you're not. You're not.
So
like
it's all of that. I mean, it's just like you said, confirmation bias, like both ways. It's like somehow the book 1984 has made everyone think it's about them.
And I feel like I've got beef with A24 because I feel like they've been doing that a lot lately.
Yeah, and they've
like I think Civil War had that problem too. I think because there are people from both major political parties in the US and every ideology in the world, right, who've seen this movie and either like it or don't like it because of how it applies to their worldview. And obviously you can't help that. All art is subjective. People take things away from it, right? You create, when you make art, you make it when you make it, and then you basically, it becomes something else when it's released because people will take it in different ways. But I don't know. I just would have liked a more definitive, I guess, statement from this movie because it felt like it was trying so hard to make one, and it was trying so hard to be smart and clever, and it relied on its aesthetics and honestly some really great performances to convince you that it was like smarter and more intellectual and more of an elevated horror than I think it really was.
Then it probably is. So, and this is just me speculating, Hayden, but I'm going to give you the answer that I bet both directors, the directors of this film and then the director
And Civil War.
of Civil War would say. And it's that these movies are designed to make you think rather than tell you the answers so you don't have to. And I think Civil War does that better than this one does. I do think, Hayden, you're told which side are the
opposite.
Do you really? So
Yeah.
Let's get into that for a second. I think Civil War does a decent job of at least telling you who the bad guys are without telling you who the bad guys are. Because, you know, the president there has openly says that whether it's by him or others saying things that he has done that line up with tenets of fascism. Like, that's not speculation. It's 100% true. Like reporters being shot if they go inside Washington.
Right.
Like that type of thing.
But there have also been left-wing and right-wing fascists throughout history. Economically.
Yeah,
I mean, we're getting off the rails.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's one is the exception to the rule and the other is not. So we'll leave it at that.
For sure. I'm saying you could both sides that too.
Yeah. So I think, but I don't think it's about saying a party is right or wrong. I think it's about saying the conflict itself is wrong. Mm-hmm. And while here, I think, like, if you're really going to get after it and say, and this is total speculation on my part, but maybe the true not enemy, but God and religion is not just control, but power, wealth, all those types of things. Rather than getting hung up on sides. You know what I mean? Right. So
that makes sense.
I feel like that's what they're trying for now. I would agree 100% that it's not executed particularly well, especially here. I think Civil War's problem is that it gets too far up its own ass about just the virtues of journalism. And that takes away from that message.
Yeah.
You know, as if every journalist is a saint. Like, there are some bad freaking journalists out there. Let's be honest. Like, there are. Oh, yeah. Now, I think one side.
And there are also people for this example, for this movie, right? There are also people out there who are using faith to spread hate, and there are people who are using faith to spread love and to motivate community outreach and mutual aid and charity and all that other stuff.
I know people who are deeply religious who are some of the nicest, best people I've ever met. I know people who are deeply religious who are the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, right. So who ostracize their own children for things about them potentially.
So I don't know. Go make the rest of your point. I just wanted to kind of get that in.
I mean, we're not reviewing Civil War right now. So
no, but I think it's a fair comparison. They both are A24 2024 movies, and you know. So I do think it's a pattern with the really vague, you know, types of things. And I think it's okay for a movie to make you think, but also put up some guardrails.
For sure.
So, should we score this thing and get out of here?
Yeah, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Well, I think we already scored, didn't we? 7.5?
Yeah, 7.5. So let's run down just the categories real quick. Story, we gave an 8. Cast performances, 8.5. Look, sound, and feel, we gave a 7. It's very dark for a lot of this movie. And I don't mean dark tone, I mean dark. Like, you know.
Yeah, and I think it definitely feels like a low-budget horror.
Yeah.
And they still do really interesting, fun, creative stuff with the camera, the way it's shot, and like there's artistry behind it, but you know, it just, there's clearly limitations.
While I'm running through the last one, can you Google machine the budget for this thing real quick?
Oh yeah, I am curious.
Intangibles, we gave a 6. I just feel like the rewatchability on this is not as high as Hereditary or some of the others.
Yeah, I feel like once you understand it, it's, you know,
it's more fun where to talk about it.
For sure. And it's
than it is to watch.
Very much a journey, not a destination kind of movie. So I think, you know, if you know where it's going, I don't think it's going to be as fun because the clues aren't there. And that's kind of and
Yeah.
they just tell you what the twist is, and that's kind of what bothers me. Like I there are movies that have really big twists that I know and enjoy either rewatching or like the first time I saw Fight Club, I didn't know what happened in Fight Club. Not gonna spoil it here in case there's someone who
Mhm.
hasn't somehow go watch Fight Club. But when you rewatch that movie, like you can see it recontextualizes it, and you're like, oh, like now that I have that information, I can see how this was signaled to me like half an hour earlier. I don't really think this movie has any of that. There's
Even
nothing I
if we
think of right
stay,
now going back like, oh wait, but that's why they did that. Like that makes so much sense
yeah,
now.
if we stay in the horror genre, even Saw has little clues along the way in
Mhm.
each movie, you know, and they show you at the end. And you're like, oh, that makes so, how did I miss that? But we all missed it, you know, and that's the fun. So did you have we found an answer?
Yeah, it's saying Deadline says A24's Heretic has got 10.5 million
Okay, so that's really
budget.
low. Really low. And so
Yeah,
I
it's
think with
small.
that's bonkers low. With that type of budget, this movie does well, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if it'll clear it in the theater, but they'll make their money back in
Yeah,
streaming and licenses and
I bet
you
this
know,
movie has an opening week of
4K Blu-rays.
about 5 million opening week.
Yeah, they did 1 million on Thursday. So
There's not much else like coming out new. Like Blitz is not gonna fill up theaters.
you don't think this movie's competing with the best Christmas pageant ever?
I just think that's a totally different audience.
I know. I'm messing with
Both
you.
horror movies in their own special way.
Oh my
That
God.
other one just doesn't look that interesting to me. It looks like a movie that's been made about 150 times.
Which one?
The best Christmas pageant ever made.
Oh yeah, no, I don't. I'm good.
Yeah. So, speaking of fun holiday movies,
Fuck my life.
next week we'll be reviewing Red One, starring Dwayne. We haven't done a Dwayne movie yet.
No, it'll be fun to get be able to talk about the final boss.
Yeah,
outside
all
of
we've
the
ever
ring.
reviewed Dwayne on is wrestling.
Yeah,
So we
5
got the
minutes of WrestleMania.
Yeah,
40.
so we got the final boss in action here with Captain America / Fantastic Four guy.
Yeah, who was this for?
Red One?
Yeah,
Us, apparently. We're gonna go see it. You know what? Hayden, this movie screams Netflix original to me.
yeah. Like I'm shocked this isn't on that because there
It's
was
the budget.
It is. Well, because the cast is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But there was a Christmas movie that released on Apple TV a couple years ago with like Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds. I think that was pretty decent.
Well, it was also the Dwayne movie on Netflix a couple years ago for the holidays with Ryan Reynolds, wasn't it? In The Rock?
I don't know.
I can't remember the name of it, but it had an egg in it. Like a one of those Fabergé egg type things.
Okay.
That was the MacGuffin.
Great.
Anyway, Red One next week. The week after, I think is Wicked Gladiator. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think the plan is I think we're gonna do both, but it might not necessarily be both of us on both.
Yeah, I'm trying to make myself want to see Wicked. I am, and I'll see it if we need to. Like I will, but I honestly think with Wicked right now it's oversaturation on the marketing. It's just too much. It's everywhere, and like that usually is a bad sign to me.
I mean, the movie just has a crazy high budget. That's why marketing's work. They need to make their money back.
I know.
I think they will.
Oh, they will. I don't.
It doesn't matter if this movie's good.
Yeah,
it doesn't. It doesn't.
And this movie is not competing with Gladiator. Like they're not going after the same market. So, I have my worries about Gladiator too, but I feel a lot better about that one than I do about Wicked.
For sure.
So.
I'm shocked that this movie has a $145 million budget, which is nuts. But Oz the Great and Powerful had a more of a budget than that, which is surprising to me because it didn't feel like it.
Interesting.
One last note before we get out of here. How the fuck can you write a prequel to The Wizard of Oz when Oz was literally just like a dream she had in her head? Like, how does that work?
Shh.
Did she just have another dream about did you dream about the lore?
Dreamt about the dream and about the lore and about all the money you can make from making this movie and musical and whatever. Wasn't it a book first? And then it was a musical.
I don't know. I have no
think
idea.
It matters. There is another, just very, very quickly.
Oh yeah, the Wicked novels from 1995.
Oh, there you go.
Whoa.
Oh, dang it. Hey, you know, I'm somebody, I always want to read the book first. So I'm going to put that on my list.
Do not do
my
that
list
to
is,
yourself.
My list is currently about 100 long. So we'll get there eventually.
GG's.
Yeah. There is another film on the way. It stars Cillian Murphy, and I'm trying to find
Yes, I can't remember what it's called, but that looks good.
Small Things Like These, and it is based on like 1980s Ireland, and it's there was like a scandal that took place at that time with like traffic, like I think sex trafficking maybe or something like that. And anyway, it's Cillian Murphy's first lead role since Oppenheimer. And
Exciting.
Looking forward to that. And it's based on a book from a couple of years ago that's really short. It's like 150 pages long. Yeah, if
Gotcha.
that. I don't even know. But anyway, so November's got a lot of good shit coming.
Word up.
Yeah, excited for that. Anyway, this movie, 7.5, go see it and check out our other stuff. We have some top 10s right now regarding X-Files, Batman. What else we got, Hayden? Like other good stuff.
Oh yeah, well, COD stuff on the way.
COD, horror movies, all sorts of fun.
Little something for everybody.
Yeah,
fun for the whole family.
Subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. Like this video. If you're still here, we're guessing you do. So hit that like button and check back for more in the coming days. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care, y'all.
Bye.